So data management starts when you have at least a framework for study protocol. And the goal of data management is to provide data for data analysis. So today I'm going to cover data management activities that are supported by REDCap. I will start by the definition of data to be collected. Then I will provide guidance on how to build and test the database, and then I will finish with the collection and the review of data. So first I would like to stress the importance of good data management practices together with the use of a good data management system. The key is to handling research on data quality and data security, and very dependent on data management. It's very important to define the data to be collected before starting building anything in the database. The goal is to provide data for analysis and not to collect a maximum of data. Key points to consider also, you have to collect and store data in a consistent manner during the study, because data are used at the end of the study for data analysis, but they are used during the study as well. And when data are well organized, it can prevent mistakes and save a lot of time later on. So you will need to define what data to collect and why you collect the data, to define the list of variables in REDCap, the list of data entry forms. You need to know also who is going to collect the data, to define the list of data entry forms, and who is involved in the study, to define the appropriate user rights. And you need to know also when data will be collected, to define the list of events in the database. So your protocol will determine the data to be collected, but so do not collect data that are not needed. Just keep in mind that you need to collect data from your data analysis. Avoid duplication of data. For example, do not collect the date of birth and the age of the same event. It may create inconsistency and to create more work during the data review. And if a design of the study is complex, provide instruction to reduce misinterpretations. Provide units to ensure comparable values. Avoid using full text. It's very difficult to analyze data when you have full text. And provide a predefined list of answers as much as possible. If you have critical data and if you want to track missing data, use none. And for prospective studies, if you have a screening phase, you have to determine if a screening data should be stored together with the study data. You need also to know if data are going to be collected only once or multiple times during the study. If data are used across studies, in that case, you have to make sure that you use the same data structure, the same data definition. It will help facilitate for data entry and data analysis. You need to know also how data will be collected. In REDCap, you can enter data manually or import data. If you have data available already in an electronic format, like in EPIC, another study, you can import data directly to REDCap. Or if you enter data manually, you have to know who is going to enter the data. It can be patients, it can be a nurse. You can have also multiple sites involved in the study. So once you have collected all this information, you are ready to start building the database. And keep in mind that the goal is to get the right data for the data analysis. So before I go further, I would like to provide some information about REDCap. REDCap is a web application designed to support electronic data capture for research studies. It is available to REDCap employees. It is free and it is secure. The application and the data are hosted on a secure servers at shop. And access REDCap from anywhere. And you can, data can be exported in a statistical format. You can use multiple sites in the study, and there are advanced features to optimize data entry and data review. Also, to help understand the rest of the presentation, I would like to clarify some terms used in REDCap. A project in REDCap is in fact a study, or you can call it database, it can be also a survey. The data collection instrument is a data entry form, also a page. You can use field or variable or question. These terms means the same thing. It represents in fact a piece of data that is collected and analyzed. If you use events, you can collect information multiple times during the study. An event will correspond to a scheduled visit, but it can also be a task that needs to be performed during the study. And for studies that are complex, you can use ARM, and each ARM can have its own sets of events and data entry forms. So first, when you create a project in REDCap, the project is in development mode. In this mode, you create your project and you test your project. Once you have final protocol and are ready to enter test data, you move your project into a production mode. If you have a study amendment during the study, you can put the study in a draft mode to make a modification of the design, but you can continue to enter data when you modify your design of your study. Once you have entered all the data and reviewed your data, it's good practice to move your study into an active mode. So just do it before the final export or the final analysis. It's a way to lock your database in one click, and it will guarantee that the final analysis will be done in the final set of data. You can also move your project into an active mode during the study if you enter data maybe once every 3 months and you want to work on your data. It's just a way to make sure that nobody will modify your data. And finally, once data analysis is done, the study is closed, you move your project into an archive mode, so it's removed from the list of projects in REDCap. But if you need to look at the project again, it's possible to move it back to production. So the first task to be done when you build a database is to create a project in REDCap, and at that time you will have to specify the type of research, enter the IRB number. Then you design the database, you manage the access rights, and then you test it. So you have to define the list of data entry forms that you need to build. If all the data are entered by the study team, you can create only data entry forms. If you have some data that are entered by subject, you will need a survey, so they will need to access to REDCap. And you can have a mix if you have screening data that are entered by the subject, and you will have data entry form that will be used by the study team to enter the study data. A project in REDCap can be classic. In that case, you will have only one record per patient, or it can be longitudinal if you need to enter data multiple times in the study. So when you create a data entry form, you will need to create the questions that will belong to this data entry form. So make sure that you will group the question from a data entry logic standpoint. For example, you can regroup the data by modules, like put all the demographic data together by tools and so on. Think also of who is going to enter data. You may want to regroup the question by the type of person who do the data entry. Also, if you have a mix of manual data entry and data import, you may want to separate the question into different data entry forms. And if you collect identifiers PHI during the study, it's best also to regroup that on a separate form. It would be easier to protect the subject data and to give access, to limit the access to this form. If you have a longitudinal study where you record data multiple times, you have to take into account also when the data is entered. You may want to record data that are entered only once into a separate form, or you can see an example on the screen here where we have some data that are entered only at baseline, and some data that are entered at every follow-up visit, so you create different forms for that. And if you don't want to create too many forms, you can also use branching logic that will display a question only at certain events. But one important point, if information is recorded at multiple events, make sure that you store this information in the same field. It will make the data review and the data analysis easier. So once you have defined the list of data entry form questions, the questions in REDCap has many attributes or parameters that are very important to improve the data quality. So first you define a type. The type will define how data are stored. A field label will be displayed on the data entry form, so make sure it's clear for data entry. Variable name will be the name of the column in the file that will be exported for data analysis. Validation will define the data type, and it will create automatic checks during data entry. You can define if a question for a question if a value is required, and it's the same thing, it will create an automatic check during data entry to make sure that there is a value. If you record identifier in your study, there is a parameter called identifier, and it's very important to set it to yes for every identifier. This will allow to de-identify data export and also to limit the access to PHI when users are not allowed to see this data. And then you can add a note to a question, and this note will be displayed on the data entry form to guide data entry. Here you can see examples of data type in REDCap. So you can define date, and you choose the format you want to use for data entry. You have a writing button on the order list when you have a predefined list of answers and the user can select only one answer. Or if you have a predefined list of answers and you can select multiple answers, you define a checkbox. There is a predefined data type also when you record a yes, no. Yes will become 0 in the database, 1 in the database and no will become 0. We have a specific format also for time. True, false, you can use also a scale, and REDCap will associate to one behind with the database. So it's very important to use this predefined data type because it will force to use the right format when you want data in REDCap. So in my question, we have to define a name. So question are mainly used by the statistician when they export the data, and make sure that the names are meaningful, that we can identify easily the content of this field. So avoid using a question name like Q1, Q2, Q3 for a statistician. It's a nightmare. We don't know what the data they contain. You can use underscore in question name. Sometimes it helps understand the meaning of the question name to separate two words, for example. Do not use special characters like dollar, dot, or space. A question name can start with a number. And for example, if if you have dates, so you can always use the date in the question name, so if you have to notify all the dates on the study, it will be easy to find. So as I said before, you have to limit the collection of full text, so use question type as much as possible. If you have a predefined list of answers, we use drop down, browsing button, or checkbox, and when you use that, REDCap will define a code or number to these predefined answers, and it will be easier to use when you use calculation or for the statistician, and he has to use the value for input programs. Consider also using checkbox if you have a list of predefined medications. So during the time people will not have to enter the medication, all the medication will be stored in the database, the same spelling, the same way. And the nice thing about it is that when you export data, REDCap will create a separate column for every value and to be a yes or no. The same thing for yes, no, numbers, integers, dates, use the predefined validation type, and you have many formats available in REDCap. You can, for these values, you can also define minimum and maximum values, so when you enter data, REDCap will create a pop-up window if your value is out of range. If you use multiple dates in the study, make sure that you collect the dates in the same format. It will be less confusing for data entry. So in REDCap you can do some calculations, but try to limit them to only when it's useful for data entry or when it's needed to take some action regarding the subject. Other calculation really should be done outside of my site of REDCap. So it's possible in REDCap to use branching logic when you want to display a field depending on previous question values. You can also use nodes to provide some to assist with data entry. For example, if you ask for a weight, you can put units to be used in the nodes. So once you have created all your question data entry form, you can define the user rights for the study. And really the best way to protect data is by limiting access. Do not give more access than necessary. If you record PHI, be extra careful. Make sure that all the questions that contain PHI are flagged as identifier. It's the only way to limit the access to this data. And if you regroup all this PHI in a separate data entry form, make sure that you limit the access to that form. For people who are not allowed to look at the PHI, make sure you do not give access to the audit trail, because otherwise they will see everything. So you give access, the access are defined in fact in the study protocol. There's a feature in REDCap where you can log one up data, and I'm going to give more detail later. But be careful also with this function, because if you give access to everybody to attention is useless. Everybody can log and log data, and so it doesn't help. So limit the number of users who can check their user rights. It's good practice also, especially if the study is long. It's good practice to check your user rights on a regular basis, at least once a year. And also to limit the number of users who can delete record. In REDCap, there is a delete button at the end of each data entry form, and it's very powerful. If you hit this button, you will delete all the data of a given subject. So not only of the data entry form that is displayed on the screen, but all data of a given subject. So make sure that you do not give access to this button to everybody. So once everything is done in REDCap, you can test the database and And don't skip this. It's very critical to test the database before you start entering any new data. You have to make sure that the design of the database is compliant with the protocol, that all the data entry forms work correctly, and that the structure will allow the performance of appropriate data analysis. It's a good time also to train data entry personnel. So in REDCap, you can generate a blank CRF. It will be a PDF with all your data entry forms. So send it to our protocol investigators for review. Enter test data, and if you have a specific team for entering data, use them to enter data. They be the best person to validate your data entry forms. Make sure you enter also a different test case to test the branch-end logic to make sure that a field will be displayed when it's supposed to be displayed. Also to validate the calculation. And then you enter test data and make sure it's clear enough, and if you have written data instruction that validate entering this test case. So once you have entered all your test data, look at the data, open data entry forms, create reports, export data. Make sure you involve also a statistician in the testing of the database. In REDCap, you can create a data dictionary, which is basically an Excel file with all the questions of your study and all the attributes, including the branching logic, calculation. So send it to a statistician, and also the blank CRF, and ask the statistician to export the data so the statistician can make sure that you will not have access to PHI, and the statistician will be able to give you feedback regarding the design of your study and the data definition of every question. So if the tests are okay, then you can move the study into production mode to start the collection of your data. And you can also delete the test data. So now you are ready to collect the data. So the first information to enter into REDCap is a subject ID. It's called also study ID or path ID. So this ID will protect the subject identity, and it will identify every record in the database, especially if you have multiple events. REDCap will group all the data of event subject. So this ID must be unique per study, and if a subject participates in multiple studies, it may be unique also across studies. So the ID in REDCap must be the first question of the first data entry form of the survey. And REDCap uses this ID as a key variable to link all the forms for a particular subject. So if you have multi-site, try to define conventions for your ID. For example, you may group your subject by sites. So I put an example here on the slide. If you like, you can use 1 digit for the site number, and for example 3 digits for the subject ID. So site 1, subject 1, the study ID will become 1001, and site 2, subject 1, study ID will become 2001. That way, it will be easier for the site to define the subject ID, and also if it's needed to group data by sites during the data analysis, for the statistician, let's say, it will be an easy way to do it. There is a feature in REDCap to optimize the quality of data entry and to minimize the data entry errors. It's called double data entry. So the data are entered twice using 2 different people, and there is a reconciliation step to resolve discrepancies. So you can import data from a CSV file, so make sure that all the data are imported, and look at the data that's imported to make sure that the format is correct. So when you have a lot of data in REDCap, you have to review the data. And it's important to do it to make sure it's complete and the data are collected in accordance with the static protocol. Try to define a review process and before you start collecting data. You need to know who is going to be involved in this process. Do you really need to check all data? If you have a big study, you may focus on critical data and share your data review process with your statistician. It's very useful for them to know how you're going to review the data and to avoid to do the same review twice. So it's very important to start reviewing the data at the beginning of the study because you can detect some potential data natural errors or maybe you need to update the data instruction. Sometimes you may miss something also during the testing phase and you may detect that there's a design issue. There are multiple tools available in REDCap. So there are checks that are done automatically during data entry. You can also track the progress of data entry and data review in REDCap. And there are tools to help you review the data manually also. So you can create your own reports and you can export data in a PDF. So you see for a given subject or given data entry forms for the whole study. And there is a tool also that will display the numeric value in a graphical way. So when you specify your validation type, when you create questions, REDCap will check automatically the format, and if a question is set as required, then REDCap also will check for the missing values. In REDCap, there is a status for each data entry form. So this status is not updated by REDCap, you will have to update it manually, but it will help to track the progress of data entry and data review. So we have to define how we are going to use this status and when we are going to update this status. So there are 3 status available for every data entry form, and there is a color associated to it. So the first, by default, the status is incomplete and it's red. So you can change the status to unverified, it will become orange, and the last status is complete and it will be green. You can use also the log function when the data entry form is logged and nobody can modify the data. And there is also an electronic signature available, which is equivalent to the handwritten signature. So I put here an example on how we are going to use this feature to track your data review or data entry. In this example, there are 3 events and 4 data entry forms. And for example, you can use status incomplete, which is red when data are not entered at all in a data entry form, orange when you have some partial data, green when all the data have been entered. You can decide to log the data entry form when you have verified the data. And you can decide to use an electronic signature when, for example, on the last form, to confirm that you have validated the data for the whole event or subject. So we really decide how you want to use this feature. And it's visual, it can really help tracking the progress of your data review. And the workflow can be customized at the data entry level, so you may not need to log all the data entry form, only maybe some forms that contain critical data, and you can use the signature, for example, on one form only. So define the process you want to use, it will really help you during the study conduct. You can also create reports in REDCap, and they're easy to create. You just pick a list of questions you want to put on your records and the way you want to order the data. For example, if you have multiple dates and you have a visit date sure that each event you may want to check that data chronological, so just create a report with a subject ID, event number, date of visit, order your report by subject and event, and then it will be easy for you to check that data are chronological. There is also a nice tool that will display a numeric result for every question in a graphical way, so you can easily see the values that are out of range. When you click on the data part, it will open directly your data entry form. So once you have entered all the data, review all the data, you are ready for final data analysis, and move your project into an active mode, so nobody can modify your data, nobody can modify your data. And make sure you do it just before the final export. So once the data analysis is done, the study is closed, move your project to an archive mode, so you will see your project, the project is closed. I just would like to come back to the first point. Before you inactive your project, you may want also to remove the access. So once the data are controlled, just remove the access to data entry and just keep the access for data review. So remove the access when people do not need to connect to your project. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. If you need more information, you can go to the CDMI website. There is a section data reporting and management. So I think we have a lot of time for questions.
So we do have some time. If anyone has questions about REDCap use, if you've used REDCap or anything that Marianne can help clarify. The interesting, wonderful thing, and I want to thank you, is we know that how critical it is that we have used discrete data, standardized data dictionaries, and this will really help us with trying to look at some of this data and our outcomes. So we know that it's a wonderful thing we all need to learn and do more of. There was a question. Hold on. Are these? We have a wireless mic? No wireless mic? Okay. There's no wireless mic, so if you yell, then we'll repeat the question so Wanamaker can hear it.
Does REDCap offer with the electronic signature, lock and unlock features, that sort of stuff? Is that 21 CFR 11 compliant?
So the question is REDCap 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, especially when you use lock and electronic signature? So REDCap is 21 CFR Part 11 capable, but it's not fully 21 CFR Part 11 compliant.
Question?
For import, you mentioned that you can import the data from Epic.
From importing data from Epic?
Yeah. And I was wondering what.
This is Tony from Wanamaker. We were wondering, we started a little bit late, but I wasn't sure if you had reviewed some of the uses of REDCap, who currently is using REDCap at shop, how many users you have, and what they are using REDCap for.
Thank you, Tony. Stand by 1 second. We're going to hold on that question. And the question was, in Epic, how to...
Well, Marianne, you had mentioned that you can import data from Epic into REDCap. And I was wondering what kind of data can be allowed and how do we go about to request for that?
Okay, so that would be, so the data from Epic, of course, that would be part of the IRB process. Sure. As to what exactly, which data fields we're going to extract and then any other information, Marianne, about that?
Yes, it depends on the data that are recorded in your study protocol, but you can usually extract demographic data, medication, and diagnosis, and similar data.
Before we, I guess, go to Tony's question. So Tony's question was, in REDCap now, can you give us examples of who's using the data and what projects are being done in REDCap?
So today we have not far from having 600 users at shop. We have more than 500 projects. Most of the projects are research projects. We have 80 projects that are quality improvement and some projects that are for operation support.
Okay, Joe had a question?
What's the process for if you want to initiate using it? How do you get that?
So the question is, what is the process to start using REDCap? So REDCap is available to every shop employee, so you can find the link on the CLMI website, just click on the link and use the username and password that you use to connect to the shop network, and you will be able to use it. And there are video tutorials and a help and FAQ section within REDCap to help you started.
There was another question up there earlier. Yes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned limited use of calculated fields.
Limited use of calculated fields within REDCap?
Right.
Marianne, could you talk about that?
Yeah, because it's quite limited. You cannot do a lot of fancy calculation in REDCap. So it's not needed for data entry. There is no point to do it in REDCap. Usually it's done by the statistician.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm involved in a multi-center site that uses REDCap, and we at CHAP here are going to do a similar study that's going to use almost identical data. Is there a way that you can copy a blank version of a database?
So the question is, can we copy a project to another database, or when you have similar projects, can you copy an existing one to
Right,
copy
and
one?
then make changes to that version.
Yeah, in REDCap you can copy a project and you copy only the structure of a project, and then you do all the modification within.
Question?
You said besides Epic, there's other sources that you can import into REDCap. Can you import from Microsoft Access into REDCap?
So the question is, can we import a study from Microsoft Access into REDCap? You will have to extract the data from Microsoft Access into an Excel file. You extract also the name of the question, and then you can import. You can import the question. You can also import the data, but you will have to format your data in the format that is required in REDCap.
Tony, any more questions at Winemaker?
No, not the lawmaker.
Okay. Any other questions in the room? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how this might interface with something like the NIH's Promise?
So can we talk about how it could interface with NIH
The Promise?
Promise? NIH Promise?
Patient-reported outcomes.
Not a familiar term here. Anyone in the room know about the NIH Promise?
It's a program they have for collection of data and outcomes.
So similar to this, Joe? Similar to what we're...
Methodology for doing it and all that.
Okay, so Tony, for Wanamaker, the question was, can we discuss how REDCap could work with NIH's program that sounds like it does something similar, which is called Promise? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Yes.
It's basically, there's a lot going on with respect to the actual items and questions related to Promise, but it is an interface that you can use to set up databases and actually program your own data collection. I just don't.
Okay, so, and that's news to us too, and so we'll look into that, I'm sure. We'll be learning more about that here at CHOP. Thank you for the question. Tony, did you get that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yep. Anyone else? Yes, way in the back.
So if you wanted to double data entry just to verify your information, you would do a comparison then? I saw one of the slides that was a comparison option.
Yeah, so the question is about double data entry and the process behind. So you need to have two data entry persons. They will enter the same records twice, and physically there will be two records that will be attended by 001 and 002. Then you will have to use a data comparison tool where REDCap will create a report with the differences between the two records, and you need the third person, the data reviewer, to correct the data entry errors, and the REDCap will merge the information into a single record.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank Marianne for a wonderful presentation, as I said.